With the WINN FM News,
I am Yulana Weeks.
Our top stories.
Brantley questions the sustainability of the pension fund if the government auxiliary employees or non-established workers receive refunds of contributions. Hanley shares progress on East Bastia housing project.
The University of the West Indies Global Campus and the OECS Commission announced the official launch of the OECS Advanced Digital Skills Scholarship.
Now the details.
Internationally, Israeli cabinet approves plans aimed at conquering all of Gaza.
The Premier of Nevis and Leader of the Opposition, Mark Brantley, weighed in on the April 30 debate on the Pensions Amendment Act 2025. One of the notable features of the Act suggests that provision be made for the non-established workers, otherwise called government auxiliary employees, to be able to get a refund if they exit the service before the minimum of 10 years. Brantley questioned the sustainability of the fund under such a provision.
Here, this legislation is saying at section, is it 35? 35 is what I have. Refunds. When a contributor ceases to be employed in the public service and is not entitled to a gratuity under this part, an amount equal to the total of his or her contributions to the pensions fund with interest shall be paid to him or her, or where the contributor is deceased, to his or her estate or personal representative, as the case may be. Now this to me now starts to sound like a savings scheme, starts to sound like a bank account, rather than a pension fund. As I say, when I look at the Social Security Fund, it's a good example of what has worked and worked well. You anticipate people paying in to sustain the fund. So if you're saying that people who pay in and after 8 years they migrate to America, they tell you, hey, I'm moving to New York, please send my money back. And the accountant general now must calculate how much ever they paid in plus interest and give them back their money. I think there's a question of sustainability of the fund, and we will have to look carefully at that.
The landmark Pensions Amendment Bill 2025 ties into the sustainability agenda for St. Kitts and Nevis, allowing more than 2,000 persons in the Federation to retire with financial dignity. There had been a long call for the pensions fund to be rectified so that the non-established workers can receive their well-deserved recognition and benefits. The Pensions Amendment Act 2025 was passed into law days shy of the Labor Day celebrations in St. Kitts and Nevis. The Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Drew, said that the fund will ensure that the persons it is targeted to benefit do not retire in poverty. Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, Minister responsible for housing in St. Kitts and Nevis, visited the West Street apartment buildings in East Bastia, which had been under construction for several weeks. The project, aimed to provide housing solutions for residents of East Bastia, was executed under the auspices of the National Housing Corporation.
A promise made and a promise kept. This is part of our continued efforts in our housing solution, especially in our urban renewal initiative. Here at West Street, we'll have multiple buildings. The one under construction would house persons in 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, 4 floors. I'm extremely happy as the Minister of Housing to be able to deliver this project to the people of East Bastia and extended communities.
More homes in East Bastia on East Street have been completed and distributed to families, but the work continues in the same vicinity to address more housing woes. Hanley said the apartments should be completed by summer 2025.
Additionally, on East Street, we are happy to report that we have already issued keys to 4 families in the first apartment building that was completed. Further down on the road on East Street and Pond Road, another being constructed and would be ready by summer of this year. This again is something historic, as many politicians in the past promised that they will do something for those residents on East Street, and God has allowed it, given me the opportunity. I am being able to deliver on those promises.
Hanley expressed gratitude to all of the contractors and the management and staff at the National Housing Corporation for their leadership and ensuring that the housing vision could be realized.
In regional news,
The University of the West Indies Global Campus and the OECS Commission announced the official launch of the OECS Advanced Digital Skills Scholarship. St. Lucia's Department of Innovation recognizes World Creativity and Innovation Day under the theme The Ocean's Call: Innovate, Sustain, Prosper. Guadeloupe is leading the way forward in coupling the spirits and the tourism industry. Good day, viewers, and welcome to the weekly edition of the OECS Newslink. I am Jacques Hinkson Compton. The University of the West Indies, or UE Global Campus, in collaboration with the OECS Commission, announced the official launch of the OECS Advanced Digital Skills Scholarship. The scholarship is part of an initiative funded by the World Bank called the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, or CARDTP. The call for applications is open to citizens and residents of Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Certified training in areas such as data analytics, cybersecurity, cloud computing, and web development are made available via the scholarship. Applications are open until May 2, 2025. For more information, visit the global.ue.edu website. Last week, St. Lucia's Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training recognized World Creativity and Innovation Day with a roadshow, visiting the major fishing ports on the island. We have more in this report.
I come to be part of the action with the Department of Innovation as we celebrate World Innovation and Creativity Week.
April 21 is designated as World Creativity and Innovation Day by the United Nations. St. Lucia's chosen theme, The Ocean's Call: Innovate, Sustain, Prosper. St. Lucia's Department of Innovation within the Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training picked up the mantle of encouraging innovation in the blue economy. The department took that mission to the road. That road included fishing ports all over the island.
The Innovation Division is charged with the responsibility of creating a culture that fosters creativity, research, and forward thinking, which would mean that, by extension, we would serve innovators, entrepreneurs, children, in fact, all of St. Lucia, persons who have ideas, who want to take them to the next level, who are already past ideation and are in development stage and are about to create their minimum viable product, or if they have already done that, how do we help them take it to market?
Partnered with development projects such as OECS SKIP, Skills and Innovation Project, and Unleashing the Blue Economy of the Caribbean, or UBEC, the roadshow traveled to St. Lucia's major fishing ports. Members of the fishing industry were given the opportunity to express concerns and offer solutions in their field. UBEC is a World Bank-funded development project purposed with protecting and using marine resources to create sustainable employment in the Eastern Caribbean. There are 4 UBEC project implementation units. Each PIU manages a separate and autonomous UBEC project. Currently, there are PIUs led by the OECS Commission, Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. St. Lucia has grown many of its own innovators in the blue economy space.
My first invention was a brine management system for desalinator. That went well, and then I realized there was a need for innovations on the ocean because of the struggle the fishermen go through day in and day out. So what I came up with, it wasn't an invention, but I kind of used different technologies to create a smart FAD, or an unmanned surface vessel.
For more information on the blue economy and UBEC, visit the OECS website at www.oecs.int. Guadeloupe is leading the way forward in coupling the spirit and tourism industry. The country recently launched the National Laboratory of Spirit Tourism. The National Laboratory of Spirit Tourism in Guadeloupe is designed to professionalize, structure, and promote the relatively new industry. Spirit tourism is a term becoming quickly popular. It's a form of tourism rooted in the tasting, learning the history of, and purchasing local spirits. The industry differs from wine tourism as it includes more diverse products, territories, and approaches. It combines sensory discovery and education of the history of distilleries, all while supporting the local economy. In Guadeloupe, visits to distilleries, mixology workshops, and themed tours provide insight into a rich and authentic world. However, the main objective of the lab is to support small and medium enterprises and artisans in developing tourism products, create a national network of spirit tourism sites, and launch a vocational training program to develop local skills.
We now bring you these international reports.
The Israeli Security Cabinet has approved plans to expand its assault in Gaza and militarily occupy the entirety of the Gaza Strip. Israel has begun calling up tens of thousands of reservists. The army chief says the decision is aimed at intensifying pressure on Hamas. That is, despite growing calls from inside Israel for a deal that would bring Israeli captives home. Let's speak to Hamda Salhout, who's reported extensively on Israel's war on Gaza, both in Israel and from Amman in Jordan. At this point, what exactly do we know?
Well, we know that this was a unanimous decision by the Israeli Security Cabinet to not only expand their operations within the Gaza Strip, but also to seize the entirety of the Gaza Strip. This is something that members of Netanyahu's right-wing government, the fringe voices, as we previously thought, this was their dream all along, to take over the Gaza Strip. But you have to remember that many of them didn't even leave Netanyahu's government when the ceasefire came into place because they were promised a, quote, absolute takeover of Gaza. So the Israelis are kind of redefining what their war goals here, because clearly after more than a year and a half of fighting, they haven't been able to contain Hamas. They haven't been able to defeat them. They haven't been able to ensure their own security. But more importantly to the Israeli public, they haven't been able to bring about the release of the Israeli captives. So with this plan, the new army chief of staff says that this is going to be the way to do that. But of course, there are going to be risks. And within Israel already, this is not popular, saying that the Israeli government is going after land grabs, prioritizing that and these right-wing sort of ideals over the lives of the captives still held in Gaza.
Yeah, there has been a shift, hasn't there? Because in the beginning, it was all about getting the captives back officially. And now, in the last few weeks, we've heard one of the far-right ministers, Bezalel Smotrich, say actually his priority is the land in Gaza. And then a couple days ago, we heard the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu echo that sentiment.
Well, if you've heard from these members of the far right, the ultra right within Israel, they've been saying since the start of the war, actually, that while they want the captives back, it's actually not their priority. Their priority is the destruction of Hamas. And while they do want to bring the captives back to Israel, it's not the main thing for them when it comes to their goals of the war. So they're redefining actually what's important to them. And now you have Benjamin Netanyahu with this plan to take over Gaza that the Israeli public is calling the, quote, Netanyahu-Smotrich plan to abandon the hostages. This is how the family members are receiving this. So there have been comments from the right wing previously, but just this morning you have Smotrich who said that it's time that the word occupation is not something that people are afraid of. It's time people start welcoming this kind of rhetoric. So it just goes to show you this sort of shift where before this was something on the far right that essentially Netanyahu was dismissing, saying that this is not going to happen, but this is what's becoming the line of the coalition.
Yeah, and a reminder to viewers that under international law, the Gaza Strip is occupied by Israel, was occupied by Israel even before they had boots on the ground. I mean, we know that the international law is very clear on that. Do we have any indication right now on what then? If they do, right, it's an if at this point, but if they do reoccupy the entirety of this strip, what then? To just keep it?
Well, it's a little bit unclear because this is a plan that's not going to come to fruition apparently for a few weeks. One Israeli source who leaked this entire plan says that they're kind of waiting for U.S. President Donald Trump to visit the region so they can get that extra support from him. You have the communications minister, Shlomo Kar'i, saying that along with the approval of these plans, now needs to come also the instillment of the voluntary migration plan of Palestinians, saying they need to kick all of the Palestinians out so that Israel can have this land. So there's that. But you also have fighting that's going to intensify as part of this plan. But the Israeli army chief of staff said that when he was sworn in, when he took over for his predecessor, saying that 2025 was definitely going to be a year of fighting. And according to this plan that was unanimously approved, it's going to start in the north. They're going to try to push as many Palestinians as they can to the south before they ultimately go to the central part of the strip and then the south. But what is their plan for the Palestinians? It's still unclear.
Which is absolutely the most important point here, because we talked about the land, but there are 2.3 to 2.4 million people living inside the Gaza Strip. And you reminded us that the far right of this government, which now appears to be the line of the entire government, says they should then be somehow removed or, as they say, voluntarily leave the Strip. Ori Goldberg is an Israeli political commentator, and he says a prolonged war in Gaza will not grant Israel security.
Netanyahu's government has committed, so has Netanyahu. He's all in, at least for now. But he has an opposition. That opposition is on the streets. Will that opposition be translated into a mass refusal to report for service? I'm not sure. I don't know if that'll be the case. But Israelis are beginning to experiment with saying no, not to Netanyahu, because remember, Israelis support Netanyahu's policy. They're not saying no to Netanyahu. They're saying no to that side of themselves that is used to bowing their heads before the instructions of the state, doing what is necessary, what is decreed as necessary by the government. More and more Israelis are starting to entertain the possibility. None of this has to do with the Palestinians, but it does have to do with the fact that a prolonged and expanded war in Gaza is seen as an effort that is not related to security. Security is the utmost foundational principle of Israel. It is above and beyond politics. This war is now seen as political, especially when its goal is being declared as the occupation of Gaza. That is very much settler parlance, and there are a lot of Israelis who are getting very angry when they hear this.
President Donald Trump has announced new tariffs on all films made outside the United States, claiming Hollywood was being devastated by a trend of American filmmakers and studios working abroad. He accused other countries of luring film crews with tax breaks, calling it a threat to national security. The move comes as the White House is under mounting criticism over its trade policies that have seen Mr. Trump impose sweeping tariffs on countries around the globe. Writing on his Truth Social platform, he said, "I am authorizing the Department of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative to immediately begin the process of instituting a 100% tariff on any and all movies coming into our country that are produced in foreign lands." We can now speak to film, TV and culture critic Ashanti Omka. Thank you so much for joining us on BBC News. So what do you make of the president's claims that the American film industry is being devastated by other countries luring film crews to their countries?
Well, certainly filmmaking has been a very global thing for over a century now. It's been such a big industry that makes so much money globally. The global box office is huge, and a lot of those films that make that money are Hollywood productions. And in this case, it is quite a blow to the industry to hear that 100% tariff is going to be put on these productions, just because mainly these huge, Hollywood productions, the Mission Impossibles, the Marvel films are being made in different parts of the globe. And that's the appeal of these films. The whole idea is that these films are being loved across the globe. And it is a very worrying thing for the film industry right now. And we don't know exactly how these tariffs are going to hit, but it's going to impact the industry for sure.
And so what could it mean for the type of films and TV series that are actually produced in the end if these tariffs were imposed?
they're just going to become much more expensive. So if we take something like James Cameron's Avatar Fire and Ash that's been made in New Zealand, if they put 100% tariff on that, say the budget for that film was 500 million, that'll already, it would already cost double that for it to be bought, to be sold to different territories. It definitely is going to affect how these are made. It's going to affect the budgets. It's going to affect the type of talent that these films will attract also. And the same goes for TV series, because certainly he has mentioned only cinema right now, but TV shows are made in throngs, not just in Los Angeles and in the heart of Hollywood, but also across the globe. So it is a very worrying thing at the moment.
It is indeed a very worrying thing for different countries. So how could the UK film industry respond, do you think?
Well, I guess that every film industry right now is formulating how to respond and how they'll be dealing with these tariffs, given that we know very little about how they're going to be imposed. The UK certainly will be responding in a big way, because say a film like Barbie that made over $1 billion globally, that was made mainly in Leviston in the UK, the Warner Brothers studio that is right here in the UK. A TV series like Andor has been filmed largely in the UK, Star Wars Andor, which is a Disney Plus TV series. So it's really interesting that we in the UK, the industry in the UK already has been struggling quite a bit, and the UK has been wanting these international productions to be filmed in the UK. There's a lot of UK talent that is working across the globe. It would be really nice to see a reconciliation for this, because at the moment it doesn't look good for the UK or for the world if 100% tariff is imposed on every production.
US President Donald Trump has directed officials to rebuild and reopen the notorious Alcatraz prison on an island near San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. The president says the jail will be used to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. Well, he made the announcement on his Truth Social account, starting with an all-capital statement: rebuild and open Alcatraz. He said he wanted the prison to be substantially enlarged before it was put back into service. Alcatraz was shut down more than 60 years ago and turned into a museum. Previous inmates included notorious gangsters Al Capone, Mickey Cohen and George Machine Gun Kelly. More than 1.5 million people visited the tiny island every year. Let's talk to our North America correspondent, Nomia Iqbal, who joins us now from Washington. Yeah, Nomia, a huge visitor attraction. I mean, I've been there amongst millions of other people, and I guess they'll be disappointed if it is turned back into a prison as Donald Trump's calling for. How likely is that to happen, do you think?
I think it's largely unlikely. It's pretty impractical. And yeah, I mean, when you say Alcatraz, people think of like all the movies that have been made there, Clint Eastwood, Sean Connery, it was even in the Marvel movies. And yeah, I've been as well. It's like, it's an amazing place to go and visit. And you can see how isolated it is in terms of, off the coast of San Francisco. In terms of rebuilding it, well, I mean, remember the reason it was closed was because it was so expensive. And it would cost so much money to redo. We're talking about billions here. And, it's in terms of like, if that would happen, it's probably not going to. I mean, the Bureau of Prisons did release a statement, just looking at it. They said, look, we will comply with all presidential orders. I should mention that Donald Trump isn't the first president to suggest potentially opening it. President Reagan considered it in 1981. But as I say, it's just massively impractical. Nonetheless, Donald Trump wants to find somewhere to house what he describes as the most dangerous and violent criminals, and Alcatraz is what he's got on his mind. But as I say, whether or not it will be open, I just think it's highly, highly unlikely, highly impractical, but it makes for a very splashy headline.
Yeah, and just briefly, I guess it would cost a lot in tourist revenue, wouldn't it? Because of all those visitors, if it suddenly wasn't a tourist attraction anymore, that would cost, the state of California money? I don't know who gets those funds.
Yeah, it would. It breaks it like $60 million a year, just looking at the statistics and revenue. And as you mentioned, that tracks more than 1.6 million visitors a year. And so it would lose lots of money in that respect. I should also add, Ben, over the weekend, President Trump gave an interview in which he basically said that the US might be hit by a recession. He also suggested that American people should be less materialistic to try and deal with it. Lots of criticism over that interview. So there are some suggestions that saying that we should reopen Alcatraz is perhaps President Trump's way of slightly causing a distraction.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see what happens with that.
Premature babies in Uganda are getting a fresh chance at survival with donated breast milk. A growing number of caregivers in Uganda are turning to these donations to save the lives of those born premature and left orphaned. Like Mercy Balibabwe's baby, who weighed just 1 kilogram, or about 2 pounds, when she was adopted.
Then I started giving the baby the breast milk, and the baby, when gained that 1.5, we was able to be discharged from Murago Hospital to go home.
Prematurity remains the leading cause of death for children under 5 globally, and Uganda is no exception. For many of these infants, the lack of access to breast milk, especially when a mother is ill, absent, or unable to produce milk, can be fatal. To address this, Uganda's health system has turned to human milk banks. Neonatal Dr. Victoria Nakibuka runs the country's largest facility, based in Kampala.
We've been able to serve over 300 babies, and we've had over 500 donors.
One of those enterprises working to make breast milk accessible is the Atta breast milk community. Since its launch in 2021, Atta has helped more than 650 infants across Uganda. All donors undergo strict screening for infections, such as HIV, hepatitis, and syphilis, and the milk is processed to ensure safety. The idea of shared breast milk remains culturally sensitive, and deep-rooted fears fuel resistance in parts of Uganda. But research by UNICEF shows that acceptance rose significantly when local health workers explained the purpose behind milk sharing.
The main thing is proper education of the communities, and then some of these cultural barriers can be overcome.
The Ugandan government is now taking steps to scale up the initiative to meet rising demand for donated milk nationwide. For Balibabwe and her adopted daughter, breast milk sharing was not just a medical solution. It was a gift of survival.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
Brantley questions the sustainability of the pension fund if the government auxiliary employees or non-established workers receive refunds of contributions. Hanley shares progress on East Bastia housing project.
The University of the West Indies Global Campus and the OECS Commission announced the official launch of the OECS Advanced Digital Skills Scholarship.
Now the details.
Internationally, Israeli cabinet approves plans aimed at conquering all of Gaza.
Thank you for listening.